Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all so much for joining our webinar today over Deep Security 10.1. We're going to be covering the new features as well as some of the support policy changes should you decide to go the 10.1 route. We'll be explaining exactly what that is as we go through this webinar, and then we'll also go over the new features that are going to be available to you in 10.1 should you decide to go this route versus staying with 10.0. I am Jerry Hayes, Customer Success Manager at Trend Micro, doing the first part of the presentation, and Raymond Salvador, a Technology Specialist, will be explaining other new features available in 10.1. And overall, again, we're going to go over the long-term releases and feature pack releases for deep security. And then Raymond will take over and talk about some of the enhancements that are available, such as the low-cost database support, agent enhancements, integration, as well as the UI and Docker support. For the release and lifecycle plan, this is going to be pretty important because there is a very distinct difference between the 10.0 long-term support or the 10.x, the feature release plans themselves. For 10.0, for the corporations and businesses out there that are more in line for waiting for the updates and making sure that we have time to test things and so forth, 10.0 is what you're going to want to do. The feature releases for 10.x, this is going to be something a little bit different for us. It will give you access to some of the new features that are going to be available in deep security and the feature release route itself, as well as what's going to be available and coming up in Deep Security 11. There are going to be some very distinct support cycles that you need to be aware of should you go the feature release route versus staying with the long-term support route that you're used to. First and foremost is the shorter support life cycle. Once Deep Security 11 releases, even if there's a year or 2 years or so forth left on the support for 10.0, you will need to upgrade to 11 within 6 months of the release of 11. And that's only, again, if you're on the feature release, the 10.1, 10.2 path itself. And again, a lot of these feature releases may or may not include some of the major and minor enhancements in the product itself, but all of them will be available again by the time you get to Deep Security 11. And again, this is just to reiterate one more time the support lifecycle plan itself. Deep Security 10, again, will have the full and normal lifespan for you. And again, if you're a corporation or a business that takes a lot of time to plan and prepare for the upgrades, then you will want to stay on the 10.0 path. And again, if you go 10.1 and 10.2 and so forth, you will get to see some of the new features that are going to be available to you in 11. But again, the support path will be very different. And go ahead and Raymond, let's go to the next slide. This is going to actually go into some of the changes that you'll see between the major releases and the feature releases. One thing to keep in mind is that critical fixes and high vulnerability fixes, they will be available for 10.0 as normal, but they may not be available, again, for the feature releases as they go. So let's say, for example, 10.1 itself doesn't have any critical high vulnerability fixes for you to want to use or need to use. So and unless you plan on going the entire feature release route, it would be recommended to stay on the long-term release where we were with that. And keeping that in mind, the feature release route will have nothing in there that would necessitate you to upgrade from 10 to a feature release in order to fix that. All those fixes should be backported to 10 that are going to be necessary, critical, high vulnerability fixes, as well as medium and low. You'll get all of the standard support and all of the standard fixes as you used to with 10.0, but if you do move to the feature release route, that being the 10.1, 10.2, and so forth, the fixes are usually going to require an upgrade versus patching the existing product itself that you're on. Overall, I realize this overview has been kind of quick. This is going to be recorded, by the way, and put on a YouTube channel. If you need to reference this later, you can contact me at jerry_hayes@trendmicro.com if you have any questions about where to find this, this recording later. But in the meantime, that's going to be it for the support itself. Again, please feel free to contact me or ask questions in the Q&A session. We'll be there for the rest of this presentation to answer all of the questions as they come up. If we're not able to get to your question throughout the webinar itself, I will follow up individually with any outstanding questions and make sure all the questions are in fact answered. So again, if we have any questions on the support policy changes, if you're a premium customer, feel free to contact your customer success manager and they'll be happy to work with you. For anyone else, again, please feel free to contact me and I'll be happy to help explain these differences and go through any situations or scenarios you may have. With that, I'll go ahead and turn this over to Raymond.
Okay, thank you, Jerry. And good afternoon again, everyone. My name is Ray Salvador. I'm your technology specialist today, where we are going to talk about the new features that came out with the Deep Security 10.1. And as Jerry mentioned earlier, I just wanted to emphasize again that 10.1 is a feature release, which means only new features have been added and no bug fixes were included in this particular feature release. And the first 10.1 feature that I'd like to discuss today is our low-cost database support, which comes in two flavors. First one is SQL Express, and the second is PostgreSQL. In the 10.1, as well as in the next updates to Deep Security 10.0 long-term support, or the LTS that Jerry covered, we now support SQL Express in production environments on a limited set of cases. First, it's important to understand first that with SQL Express, there's a built-in limit of 10 gigabytes in database size, and this could easily be exhausted on a production environment. So once you exhaust the 10 gig limit on your SQL Express database, it will result in a service impact to deep security. And so because of this condition, deployments with SQL Express database are limited to 50 or fewer hosts only, meaning maximum of 50 agents. And it only supports IPS and anti-malware modules because typically these two modules are the least chatty modules in terms of storing threat events data on your database. So if you are also planning to enable other deep security modules like firewall, the integrity monitoring, log inspection, or maybe even app control down the road, then make sure to use full edition SQL or Oracle database from the get-go. And you will receive warning shown on this screenshot when you run the readiness check if you are using SQL Express, letting you know of this limitation. And if standing up your own Deep Security Manager and its full edition database may seem very costly for your operations, then you may consider also looking into the Deep Security as a Service as a potential option. This is a service hosted and maintained by Trend Micro on our cloud. So we host the Deep Security Manager and its associated database for you. The next one is the support for PostgreSQL. So because with the limitation imposed by SQL Express, another alternative for the low-cost database is the PostgreSQL 9.6, starting with your DSM 10.1. PostgreSQL 9.6x is now available for hosting your DSM database aside from the traditional options like your Microsoft SQL or Oracle servers. Please note, though, that this is only available for fresh installation of DSM. It doesn't support database migration from your Oracle or MS SQL going to PostgreSQL. So if you're planning to use PostgreSQL in the long run, then it's better to start with that database server from the get-go. And the support for the PostgreSQL is also, we do have pre-installation check supported for PostgreSQL database, and it will show you whether you have a good database prerequisite or not. Again, only PostgreSQL version 9.6x is supported at this time. And our next topic is support for additional agent platforms for the different modules, including our expanded support for application control on other operating systems. For Debian 8, we have released a version 10 agent that is manageable from Deep Security Manager 10.1. It supports all modules like anti-malware, WRS, firewall, intrusion prevention, so everything except the scanner option for SAP. The Debian 8 can also function as a relay, by the way. And on the other hand, AIX 7.2, that is supported by a version 9.0 agent managed by DSM 10.1, which provides these four capabilities like firewall, IPS, integrity monitoring, and log inspection. So Debian 8 has more capability. With AIX, it has four modules available for you for AIX 7.2. And beginning with the version 10, we started supporting major Linux distributions like CentOS 6 and Red Hat 6 and 7 for application control. Now in DSecurity 10.1, we've further expanded our supported platforms in app control to other Linux distributions listed here like Debian, SUSE, and Ubuntu, as well as with common Windows platforms like 2008, 2012, and 2016. But please note, only 64-bit architecture of these operating systems are supported. So rule of thumb, if it's 32-bit, it's not supported. But when in doubt, if your OS is supported for application control or with any of our new features, you may visit that shortened link down below that I pasted for our platform support page. Those are all online documentations available publicly for deep security. And the next one is our zero impact network driver, which is very useful during the deployment of the new 10.1 agent. In the previous DS versions, a fresh install or when you're doing an upgrade of an agent, it creates a slight network blip. This happens when we are inserting our driver into the network stack of the target host computer. But this network blip, though very small, it sometimes causes network connection disruption. Like for example, it could cause RDP session to crash on rare occasions. But now with the new 10.1 agent, it no longer creates that network blip while installing our network filter driver, and thus it creates zero impact on your network connection during agent installation or when you're doing an agent upgrade. For the anti-malware module, we're introducing a time-boxed scheduled scan concept. And we also now support real-time scan for the Oracle Linux. In the DS 10.1, we provide timeout settings when running malware scheduled scans. How this works is if an ongoing malware scan task exceeds the timeout value that you assigned to it, then that scan task will be stopped. A good use case example for this one is if, let's say, you need to run a scheduled scan at 1 a.m. on those server farms and you want to ensure that the scanning no longer takes place after 5 a.m. because you'll need to, let's say, have another task execute, like maybe running your scheduled backup or some other activities on those target hosts. Then you may set a timeout for the scheduled scan for 4 hours, so the scanning stops at 5 a.m. And then so for the Oracle Linux, we only support on-demand scan in the past. With the new 10.1, we now support real-time scan on Oracle Linux 6 and 7, but for 64-bit only. So please take note, it's only for 64-bit. Our next enhancement is on the Dsm User Authentication via SAML2 integration with identity providers. We now add support for third-party identity provider or IDP with our integration using SAML2. When deep security is deployed and configured to work with your identity provider, there is no longer a need to manage admin users directly within deep security console. In addition, you can leverage features of your IDP such as password strength or the change period enforcement, even one-time password, two-factor authentication, or MFA, or multi-factor authentication, when signing in to the Deep Security Manager using SAML. In the SAML single sign-on, a trust relationship is established between the two parties listed here. One is the identity provider, and then the service provider. The identity provider has the user identity information stored on a directory server. And then the service provider, which in this case is Deep Security, uses the identity provider's user identities for its own authentication and account creation. The identity provider and service provider establish trust by exchanging a SAML metadata document with each other. And then the next enhancement we have is the Docker support. In 10.1, we continue to build on the feature set that we started in the Deep Security 10 for Dockers. Enhancements added in 10.1 for Dockers include container information for anti-malware events. Like, for example, for anti-malware events detected within a container, we provide now container ID, the container name, the image name, and also container information is propagated to external applications via event forwarding. So for example, with your syslog integration or with Amazon SNS. As well as we do have REST API available for those metadata synchronization. And to assert the integrity of the Docker hosts, customers can now use features like application control, integrity monitoring, and log inspection for those Docker host protection. Beginning with our Deep Security Rule Update 17-015, we've added a new integrity monitoring rule, Rule ID. In this example on the screenshot, you'll see 1008271, which was intended to monitor changes to Docker files on a protected Docker host. And then additional rules to protect Docker deployments will be rolled out throughout this year as we see fit, or even down in the future. We'll be providing new rules for it as well. And when collecting diagnostic information on a Docker environment, we also now include network configurations like drivers, MTUs, etc., storage driver, and backend file system information. These information are useful whenever we're troubleshooting with our trend engineers for some issues related to deep security deployment. And then the next one on our enhancements list are web UI enhancements related to the computer screen as well as the newsfeed. In the past, there had been reports from customers about the manager console, long page load time, especially the computers page in the Deep Security Manager. So we've made improvements in Deep Security 10, and that continues to improve also in 10.1. This feature enhances user experience both performance-wise and functionality-wise when using the computer screen in the DSM console to perform actions on specific computers. So for example, one of those changes we've made is we split out the tasks from the status column shown here on your screenshot here into a new non-default column called tasks. And then tasks are also added to the computer's details page. And the sorting behavior on the computer screen has been changed as well for some of the columns. Number one is the status, and the status light columns are now sorted by importance. Those different color indicators like red, yellow, green, or gray, rather than alphabetically. And then second thing is the software update status or the security update status columns are now sorted based on importance as well. So whether it's out of date, so that comes up first on the list, and then followed by up to date. So obviously you want to monitor first whatever is outdated on your environment so that you'll be able to prioritize taking action on those compared with the ones that are already up to date. We also added the ability to sort by icon, which sorts computers by host types or subtypes, power states, features, etc. And then lastly, system-defined status like those that says none or NA, and any empty strings are now sorted at the bottom of that list. And then for the task and cloud instance metadata column, so this is for those deployments in the cloud, equals and not equals when you're doing the advanced search. So those search parameters, they now match single items in the list and not necessarily the whole list. So for example, when you're doing an advanced search with task equals, let's say checking status, will match a list that shows checking status and then those with update of configuration pending. And then the next enhancement on the UI is on the Newsfeed. So there's a new tab labeled News located on the top right corner of the DSM screen, like shown on the screenshot here, which opens up a list of short news articles that have been published by the product team. So this gives you proactive notifications that are useful in managing your deep security, like any urgent alerts. For example, a new critical patch was just released by our product team, or let's say if there's a new malware threat that's going on globally, if we're seeing, let's say, a big spike in some ransomware detections, we can post those information in that news feed as well. Or maybe any service announcements, like with Deep Security as a Service, if we're going to do some maintenance notification, would be shown up on that news feed as well. Users can also subscribe to that notification via RSS atom feed. So if you have any third-party RSS reader, you can subscribe to that atom feed, so you don't need to log in to the DSM console anymore just to see those proactive notifications. And that's pretty much it. So those are the new enhancements that we have released in this feature release 10.1. So there's no bug fixes, no vulnerability fixes that are included here. These are purely new features. And like Jerry said, so we introduce new features down the road until we've released the next major release after 10.0. Then we're going to be putting them into succeeding feature release packages. So today we have 10.1. Eventually we're going to have 10.2. And then 6 months down the road, we're going to have the next major release on top of 10.0, where all of these feature releases are going to be put into a cumulative package. And with that, I return you back to Jerry. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thanks everyone. Again, this was one of our shorter webinars, but we really wanted to make sure you had an opportunity to go over the new features in Deep Security 10.1. And more importantly, we wanted to reiterate the different support channels that are available for the feature pack release versus the long-term release. That being mostly an aggressive upgrade schedule should you decide to go to the feature pack release. So we wanted to give you an opportunity to see some of these features to determine for your own business if this is the appropriate path for you to go through. We hope this session has worked for everybody and helped answer some of the questions. If not, again, some of the Q&A questions, it looks like we still have some outstanding. I will be following up in the next day or two to make sure all of these questions do get answered. From the looks of this, we might also be creating a FAQ over this, and I will work to get that into a KB article as soon as possible as well. Again, these are going to be recorded and put up on a YouTube channel early next week for anybody that's not able to make it, or if you know of anybody that wanted to attend but couldn't. It will be available for replay again by early next week. Again, thanks everybody for attending, and we'll see you next webinar.